What's up, y'all? I'm working on my little redneck grounding plug for my generator out here because I realized I didn't have a ground, and we'll get to that. But I just wanted to take a moment and do a little quick video on what is a ground. Why do we have grounds? What do they do and how do they work? When you plug something into a power outlet, we got three prongs. The two straight ones that go up and down, that's the hot and the neutral. They make a circuit from where the power is created, whether it's a power station or a generator, back to the power station or the generator. The hot side is where the power comes out of the thing, basically. It's the side that's energized. The neutral side is just the return line. So the neutral, unless something is plugged in and it's making a whole circuit, unless it's making a whole loop, if there's nothing plugged in, the neutral is neutral. It's the no electricity going to it. It's just a way for the water, if we use the garden hose analogy, to return back to the bucket, which is the generator. So that all probably makes sense to most people. But so what's the ground? The ground is there for safety. It's there to stop us from getting electrocuted. But what does it do? Why is it that when we take apart a power outlet, we see three wires, we see a black wire, a white wire, and a wire with no insulation on it whatsoever, and you go, who did that? That's how it's supposed to be. The ground is better uninsulated. It's safer if it's not insulated. And the reason is because the ground is basically a third wire that goes just straight back to the generator or the bucket. It's essentially just a second neutral. And the purpose of that is that if the bucket overflows, the bucket or the lamp or whatever, there's a problem, and the electricity starts getting out, that ground wire gives it somewhere to go that's not into you, that's not into the home, that's not into your printer or your computer, because all of those things cause one problem or another. If it goes into you, it could kill you. If it goes into your house, it could start a fire inside the wall, and that's really hard to put out before it burns your house down. And if it goes into your computer or your printer, well, you got to buy a new one. So obviously one of those things is less bad than the other two, but we want it to just all be safe. The purpose of the ground is to be the most readily available thing for the electricity to shock if something goes wrong. And so that's why it's completely exposed. It's just a bare open wire so that if anything gets out of the insulation, it touches that. It's supposed to touch that, because that just sends it right back home where it's supposed to go. Whereas if it didn't have that, it would start to try to create its own path, and it would go through things it wasn't supposed to go through. If there's a hot wire touching a ground wire, I hold this up, this is not going to be a hot wire, so I don't know why I did that. But if you have a hot wire that's usually black, just don't worry too much about the color code. That's just the only color Plasti Dip I had on hand. Don't worry about that. But the point is, if you have a wire that has electricity going through it, and it happens to get exposed, the insulation gets chewed off by a mouse or something, and you touch that, we all understand that could be really dangerous. But if it's already touching that ground wire, it's easier for it to go through the ground wire than it is for it to go through you. And the upshot is that it won't go through you. It just all goes through the ground wire, even if you touch it. That's awesome. So that's why we have grounds and what they do. Short little bonus video for people who are like, I already knew all of that, or if you're just real interested. This is a grounding plug, and I need to wait for the Plasti Dip to dry completely. But basically, and this helps me talk a little bit more about how grounds work and what they do. Basically, when we've got the three, we've got ground down here, neutral over here, and the hot wire here. So right now, with my particular generator setup, there is no ground. It says neutral floating. That is not what it should say. It says down here, important, connect ground to earth before operating. Me and everybody else who's ever bought a generator ignored the shit out of that. What, you really think I'm gonna pound a grounding rod in here in the Kroger parking lot? I'm not grounding my generator to the earth. Now, it's great if you can. That's how your house is grounded. If you've ever seen a big copper pipe sticking up a few inches out of the ground with a piece of wire going to it and you stub your toe on it, that's your grounding rod. The ground can be connected to the ground. but it has to be beat down in there so it gets a little bit into the water table, and I'm not going to get into all that because I don't completely understand. If the ground is supposed to be just connected back to the generator or to the neutral wire, how is it different from a neutral wire? Well, the upshot is it's really not very different, and that's where we can get into trouble. And that's where we get into talking about what is a bonded versus a floating neutral. A floating neutral is a neutral that is not attached to anything except for the generator. A bonded neutral ground system is where the ground and the neutral are bonded together. They're connected, and that's what this is going to do. It connects the neutral to the ground. Why would you want that? Well, because like I said, my ground is not connected to the actual earth. It's just connected back to the generator. Okay, so why do I need to do this? Well, because the guys who made the generator, and I don't know why this is not the default, but they didn't connect them together. Correction. The reason that the generators come with a floating neutral instead of a bonded ground and neutral is because the primary usefulness when Americans buy a generator is to power their home when the power is out, and your home is already bonded, and we'll get into why that matters and what that means. Every house is legally required by the code to have a grounding rod that's actually put into the actual ground, so that if anything goes wrong, that extra water, electricity, that water that overflows the bucket, instead of going all over the floor or shocking you to death, it just goes and pours itself into the earth. But in my mobile system, that's not an option. And even in most homes, the neutral and the ground are bonded, even though there's a grounding rod. But they need to only be bonded one place. The purpose of that is, one, it allows that ground to do good. If you just have a piece of wire that goes nowhere, it's not any different than no wire at all. So you don't have a ground, which is what I realized today after a year running this generator. My grounding circuits were just redundant, pointless mess. But, sorry, I'm kind of getting in the weeds here. So, what I'm doing is I'm connecting at the generator, I'm connecting that ground to the neutral, so that when that hot wire, when the live wire connects to something it shouldn't, that grounding wire can pick up that current and send it back home to the generator. If the ground and the neutral are not bonded together, and you don't have a grounding rod, it's not going to pick up that electricity. It's just going to still let it be dangerous. So, why don't they all come that way, and why don't we just bind them all together all the time? If we have the ground and the neutral and they need to connect, then why do we have 3 prongs on the outlet? Why don't we just have the 2 wires twisted together or something? Well, this is why. Because that naked ground wire is not supposed to run any electricity through it all the time. If you have a loop, sorry, that's not a hand gesture, y'all. Let's not get into that. It used to just mean okay. Now some people say it means racist, so we have to make sure we never do that. We're not racist. So if you have a loop of wire, I'll cut that part out. If we have a loop of wire, we plug a lamp in. A light bulb is basically just a wire that heats up and makes light. So what we do is we take it from being live on this side and neutral on this side, we connect them together, now we have a big loop. If we were then disconnect the loop somewhere else, over on the other side of the loop, we would have the same, even though the lamp would be going through it, we would have the same hot and neutral. So what it means is once we plug something in, that whole circuit becomes hot. Well, now we don't have a safe neutral wire. And most of the time when we're using appliances, they're plugged in. So what that means is the ground wire has to stay exposed. And it has to go back to the neutral. But if we connected them together more than one place, that would mean that we would have two parallel paths. So we'll go back to the garden hose analogy. So we've got our battery or our generator or our water spigot up here. And down here we've got our light bulb or our power appliance that we're trying to use, or our sprinkler that we're running the garden hose to. But it's one of them fancy new sprinklers that sends all the water back. Ain't that just a ticket, farmers? You got to get one of these. So we've got the live, which is pressurized. We've got the neutral, which is also pressurized once it's hooked up, and it's going back. And now we've got this ground wire here that right now doesn't go to anything. The ground wire has to be bonded to the neutral wire, and we're going to do that right here. So now, if at any point along here, because remember in a wire, sorry, it keeps unfocusing. Remember in a wire, these are all three in the same little housing. They're all three almost next to each other, touching each other, but with insulation between them, except for this one, the ground wire is uninsulated. So if this tube leaks, or if this tube leaks, or if the appliance leaks, they all touch that ground wire pretty quickly. If you've got a high-powered appliance that's got three prongs, the ground is actually run inside of the appliance itself, so that if anything goes wrong inside the appliance, it's already ready to go into that ground wire. Ain't that something fancy? So what that means is if anything leaks, all of the water in the analogy goes back through this ground wire and back into the generator or the power source. Awesome. If this is not connected here, it means it won't go through this at all, because this is a road to nowhere. But if this is connected more than one place, if we connect this here too, and we imagine this running under normal circumstances, the water goes in here, it goes through the sprinkler, it goes back out here, it gets to a T-junction, some of the water will go this way, and some of the water will go this way. What that means is now our bare exposed ground wire has just become a live wire, and it can shock you right to death. That's why it's really important to not bind it in two different places. If it's only bonded in one place, it can only go back home. And it will only do that if something goes wrong. If it's bonded in two places, some of it will always go through the ground wire, and that makes the ground wire dangerous instead of protecting you. And beyond that, if you do have an emergency, and for some reason the appliance dumps all of its electricity into this ground wire, it's also going to go out here into this neutral wire, which may not go straight back to the generator, but may be inside of your wall somewhere else. It may be going all around your living room, and you don't want an emergency short overload to be sent anywhere but outside your house. So if we had bonded the neutral and the ground in my breaker panel and out here at the generator, the neutral wire that's supposed to be exposed and unused for safety would just become a second live wire, and that means anything that touched the neutral could get shocked, at least in between the 2 points where they were bonded. Anything on the panel to the outlet side would be safe, but everything between my electrical panel and the RV and the generator would be ungrounded. And not only ungrounded, but it could have an exposed live wire. So you really have to be careful and know what you're doing if you're going to try to bond your own ground and neutral. It's not that complicated, but you have to make sure you do it in the right way. You have to make sure that you test everything and know exactly what you have and what you're changing. There's a really great video about that I'm going to link down here in the description. He's the guy that actually opened my eyes. I just was scrolling on YouTube one day and I went, I wonder where mine is bonded. It's not bonded at the generator or at the panel at all. You could, and in your house, it's probably bonded at your main breaker panel. Now I could bind mine at my main breaker panel inside the RV. Here's my main breaker panel. As you can see by the fact that it's not screwed to the wall right now and there's no cover on it whatsoever, safety is paramount in my house. But you really don't have to worry about the details. You know, you don't have to pinch the pennies if the dollars are already secure. So I don't recommend this for y'all. Keep your panel screwed into the wall and with a cover on it. So this bar up here, and I can touch them all freely because mine is based off a generator and the generator's off. Do not go poking around. Seriously. This is how you hurt yourself. Don't go touching stuff on your electrical panel. You're going to see me touch it to point to it. So this bar up here is the neutral. See if these suckers will pop right out for me. This bar in here, this is the live. And you can see when the whole thing is put together, you can't even hardly see the live. That's very intentional. Good. Someday I'll finish my electrical system and screw this shit all back together. So, there's your live. And up on top, there's your neutral. And you see this big old white wire is plugged into the neutral. That's where it comes from. Here coming into the panel, we see we've actually got 4 in this setup. But we see these 4 big giant wires. Green, black, white, and red. I believe the red goes to this sub panel over here. We're not going to worry about that right now. But the white goes to this big old neutral bar up here. The green is going to this little bar over here. Now we can see it. That's why I wasn't sure. And you see all these exposed copper wires. Those are all the neutrals that are coming back from all the outlets. And also, you'll notice most of the time that bar is also attached to this box itself. That's why we make our electrical boxes out of metal. So that if anything comes loose in this box, it touches the box, it puts it right to the ground. And then the black wire goes to this breaker here, so that the main breaker, in my case 50 amps, is able to trip if anything in the whole system goes over the capacity of the main breaker. If the whole system combined goes over the capacity of the main breaker. I'm making it too complicated, I think. So back here in the panel, you'll see we've got white, red, black, and green. The red wire, it goes over to a sub panel. That's another video. But if we look at just the white wire, the black wire, and the green wire, those are the 3 wires that come in from the generator, the big beefy wires. The white goes up here to this bar, that's the neutral. The green goes down over here in the corner, it's hard to see, but to this bar. That's where all the grounds, all these exposed copper wires come back to. It's also usually attached to the box itself. That makes it much safer. So that if anything in the box comes loose or has a problem, the box itself will send it right back to the generator. And then we see this is the live, this is the neutral. This main breaker, it says 50 amps on it. This is a 50 amp RV. This main breaker actually takes the power from this black wire and connects it to that live bar. When you plug this sucker back in, that's what it does. And so what that means is the breakers themselves, they only really have, and I know there's 2 coming off of pretty much all of these, but this one, it only has 1 wire. So again, please, seriously, you cannot turn off the power company. I can turn off my generator and make sure all of this is completely not energized. If you go pulling these things out of your power panel and you die, that's because you're dumb, and I told you not to do it. Do not. If it's me saying that so seriously, it's because it's not a risk, it's a guarantee. All right. But so when you pull these things out, which you're not going to do, you'll see there's only 1 wire. But you'll see there's a clip down here that just clips onto this piece of plastic to hold the thing in. And then there's a clip up here, which clips onto them little tabs. I'm just a little confused for the electrical folks on my channel, if there's anyone on my channel. I'm a little confused why I've got like alternating bars here, because I've only got 1 phase. But I take it they're tied together back there. It looked like I had a neutral. Anyways, y'all are electricians, you know this. So if we pull all of these out, we see this bar. We got the one with the screws on it on the top, and then we got these little pegs down here. Now in your home, it's a little bit more complicated than the RV. You see how some point up and some point down? Those would be two different phases, and well, that's a different video. So in my RV, they're all just one phase, so they're all the same. But when you plug the breaker in, the breaker connects from that bar, which is the live bar down on the bottom. That one. It does not connect to the neutral. It connects from there to a black wire. That's the black wire that goes to your plug. On the other side of the plug, there'll be a white wire. That wire comes back here. So that way you connect the black to this big black wire down here, through the breaker, through the bar, through the other breaker, and then it goes all the way to your lamp through this black wire. You plug into the outlet, the lamp connects the black wire to the white wire, and that comes back to the neutral. So it goes back to this white wire, it goes back out to the generator. If we were to decide to bond the neutral here at this panel, and we would just take one of these copper wires down here, and we would tie into it, and we would plug it in up here, or we would take a big one and do that. That would make the grounds work. And that would be just fine, and that's how your house is wired. Your house is wired at the panel. There's a connection, and if you look, you probably would have to take your panel apart, which again, do not do. But some of them you can actually see where those two are binded together. If I were to do that here and now, what that would mean is that the green wire and the white wire from the generator would both have power going through them. It would also mean that if I had any sort of short in the generator, it would send it in here. And this is the last place I want to catch on fire, because this is my house. If something has to catch on fire, I'd rather it be outside the house. And so these two are completely disconnected here, even though they are connected at the generator. The reason for that is if anything goes wrong in here, it will send it through the ground, and it will send the short outside instead of sending it inside. If you have just one, it should be as close to the power generation as possible, which at your house, because you don't own a power plant, it's at your panel. And remember, if you have two, that means all your ground wires are potentially deadly, so we don't ever have two. In the RV, it's at the generator. And why don't they just bind them together at the power plant? Because everybody's got a grounding rod stuck into the ground, and that would destroy the whole system. And also because there is no ground that comes from the power plant. It's only two phases and a neutral. But again, that's another video. But let's not worry about that. So, to recap, alright, that's a lot to cut together, and I hope I can make it make sense. Electricity is complicated. But, to recap, why do we have a ground wire, and what does it do? The ground wire is a safe return line for electricity that gets out of the circuit it's supposed to be in. It's uninsulated so that everything can touch it. So if something gets through its insulation, if the insulation falls off, if a mouse chews it, or if you grab with your hand for some reason, don't do that. But if you grab with your hand for some reason, that the exposed wire will be the easiest thing for the electricity to flow through. If it was coated with rubber, it wouldn't flow through that. It would flow through you. So what is a bonded versus a floating neutral? A bonded neutral is a neutral that is attached to the ground wire so that they have a point where they connect. What is a floating neutral is one that does not have a point where it connects to the ground. If that's the case, then your ground better be grounded to the ground with a ground rod. And even then, modern electrical codes, I believe all of them, but I'm not certain, I'm not an electrician. Modern electrical codes require that homes have a bonded neutral and ground. And the purpose of that is to make sure that the electricity always flows back to where it's supposed to flow to. I think that pretty much sums it up. Oh, and why do we only bond the neutral and the ground at the farthest away point from the outlet or from the house, the closest to the power station or wherever the power is generated? Because that way, if the ground gets used, it sends all of the circuit short, all of the electrical short, whatever, sends all the power out of your house instead of to someplace in your house. So that way, if anything goes wrong and something does catch on fire, hopefully it's outside in my case, or in your case, hopefully it doesn't catch on fire at all. But we'll send it into the grounding rod. It's down in the ground, because if you ever tried to light dirt on fire, it doesn't burn. Okay, I hope that made sense. If you learned something, let me know in the comments. If that made no sense at all, let me know in a way that won't hurt my heart and soul, because I really care about you guys and I want to make good electrical videos and stuff. So, last part of the video, my Plasti Dip is mostly dry. We're going to activate it. Woo! So I pulled a little piece of this tape off the end. Here we go. And now, my neutral and my ground. And for those of you who just went, what the fuck, you're definitely not supposed to do that. You are, if you know what you're doing. They even sell devices that do just that, but they look a little bit better. They just look like a plug with no wire coming out of it. And that's what I would have made, but I didn't have a spare plug laying around. But I did have a piece of coat hanger and some Plasti Dip. So now, only at this outlet, which is on the generator itself, and it's not the one I'm using. It would be fine to use this outlet, but it's hard if you plug something into this. Only at this outlet, the ground and the neutral are bonded together. So if anywhere along the system the ground gets powered, electricity flows into that ground because it got out of where it's supposed to be. It will send it straight here, where it will go right back into the neutral, which is connected right to the generator itself. And that will prevent any problems. If you were, I'm going to do it for demonstration purposes, y'all. Don't do this. Don't do this. I did this as a child and my dad was very angry with me. If you were to take this and plug it into one inside of your house, now if there's any short anywhere in the whole system, it will send it here and it will start a fire inside of your wall. Because potentially that could be sending 50 amps through that one little copper 15 amp ground wire, and it would, I don't know what would happen. Also, don't do this. Know which side is which if you're going to do this. If you bind the hot to the ground, it will start a fire inside of your wall, or hopefully it will just blow the circuit breaker. But it could start a fire inside of your wall. I had a little piece of fork or whatever it was get so hot it burned my hand. It welded itself to the power outlet, and my dad was very angry. If you live with your dad, that's 2 reasons not to do this. So, so there you have it, folks. That's what a grounding plug is. That's how to use it. Again, if you want to make your own, you can. You should have a multimeter, and you should watch the video I'm going to link down here in the description. He will tell you everything more that you need to know about actually doing this, testing your system, and verifying that what you're doing is what you need to do to make it safer, and not what you shouldn't do to make it deadly and dangerous. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there. Stay powered up.